Bonjour à toutes et tous, vous écoutez First Print, votre podcast comics préféré pour une nouvelle émission au format SuperFriends à l'occasion du festival Cultissime. On se retrouve à Angers avec l'immense Mark Millar pour une interview enregistrée en plein air. Donc on s'excuse si vous entendez des bruits de camions et ce genre de choses-là, mais on espère surtout que vous entendrez Mark Millar qui se déplace en France pour la première fois depuis je ne sais combien d'années. Le générique se lance et cette interview elle est en anglais bien entendu et même en écossais si je puis dire. On se lance. So hello, Mark.
Hello, good to see you.
It's really a pleasure and an honor to have you here on our podcast. How are you?
Do you know, I'm loving it. I've been in France 24 hours and I sound French already. You know, I've lost my Scottish accent completely.
Yeah. Not completely. You still have efforts to do it if you want to lose it completely. So let's talk because we only have like a half an hour, so we can do a whole look back at your whole career.
I'm happy, whatever you want.
So I want to speak about the Millarworld.
Okay.
So it's been 20 years more than 20 years.
Just over 20 years. Yeah, it's crazy. Like.
What's your global feelings about what's Millarworld right now compared to when you started 20 years ago?
It's weird. It literally surpassed my wildest expectations. Like my idea was, let's see if I can create one new character. You know, because it's quite hard to create something people care about, you know. It's much easier just to do Spider-Man or do X-Men or something, just tell a story with something that someone else has created. And it was Stan Lee who said to me in 2002 or 2003, he said, give it a try, just see what happens. He said, I think you'll be good at it. And I did one, it worked out well. I did another one, it worked out well. And I was like, hang on, this is easier than I expected, you know. So I never anticipated it would become, 20 years, 25 franchises, multiple movies sold to Netflix and everything. You know, I couldn't have imagined any of this. I was just thinking, I hope I don't lose money. You know, that was all I cared about then. I was like, I hope I can finish this book without losing money. That was all that mattered. You know?
But it's really because you just mentioned that you couldn't have expected all that, all the stuff that happened. For example, like the multiple adaptations of your works, the Netflix buyout in 2017. But yesterday, you answered a question and you said that you had planned all over from the beginning that you would at some point do a big crossover. So
that was my dream.
How could you plan that from the start without being able to anticipate everything that would happen?
It was my wildest dream, but not always. I mean, you fantasize about getting off with movie stars, but it doesn't mean you're going to get off with movie stars. It's like, I would lie in a train daydreaming about, if I, in 15 years' time, it would be wonderful to work with this artist and it would be wonderful to tell this story. But I didn't know if it was ever going to happen. It was just my daydreams, And then every success gave me the money to then hire another artist who I could use for my next project and so on. And then it started to build up into something quite powerful, So by the time Kick-Ass came along, I was like, this is good, like everything I have been dreaming about might actually happen now. Because if you think about it, most creator-owned comics fail, most lose money. And because a comic costs a lot of money to put together, if I don't have to pay a writer because I am the writer, but I have to pay an artist, which can be very expensive. That might cost for one issue, for a big name artist, $40,000, for one issue. So multiply that by 6 issues, and that's $250,000. And then a colorist, a letterer, an editor. Then you have to pay for printing. Then you have to do marketing and everything. So each book can lose a lot of money, you can fail, and most fail, So the fact that everyone worked out really well was incredibly lucky, and over time I got more confident and thought, okay, this will probably be okay. But at the beginning it was a little bit, it's like, I hope this goes okay.
I seem to remember at the end of Kick-Ass 3, you launching the idea that everything was sort of connected.
Yeah.
That it was in the same universe. But back then you didn't do like the first issue of Big Game.
Yeah.
What made you want to wait to do the actual crossover that we ended up having?
Well, I always had the crossover in my head because it came from Wanted. So the idea in Wanted was that all the super villains got together and killed all the superheroes. That was over 20 years ago now. And I said that happened in 1986, that all the superheroes were murdered. And then they made us forget they ever existed. So we only remember Superman as Christopher Reeve, the actor. We only remember Batman as Adam West, the actor, and everything. And I always had an idea of what if a new generation, I think there's even a line in Wanted about it, a new generation of heroes just start to emerge, and they beat these bad guys, the bad guys then face the next generation to come. And it was always in my head, but I never thought I'd be able to do it. And the reason I thought it would be impossible is I never anticipated selling the company to Netflix, So I thought, okay, if I use Kick-Ass, and Kick-Ass is in 17 pages, then I have to pay the artist for the 17 pages that I'm licensing Kick-Ass. But if I'm only using the magic order for 11 pages, it's suddenly really complex. I have to pay that artist. And what happens if some characters are in 2 panels? And how do you it'd be royalties? It would have been a nightmare. I never thought I'd be able to do it. But the amazing thing with it all being owned by Netflix was the legal issues wasn't a problem, because every artist had been paid off like I was when we sold the company and the buyout. So it meant I just said to Netflix, who own all the characters now, do you mind if I do a crossover with all the characters? And they were like, do what you like, So it was perfect. It worked out great. So I'd always dreamed of it happening, and then it did, which is nice.
And to emphasize a little bit more, this question is, when did you know that it would be the right time? Because you could have done already a big game like 5 years ago, without launching without launching the new series that you got after the Netflix buyout, like the Magic Order, Prodigy, or even Nightclub. So what did you what spoke to you like to be the right moment to do, now I can do this?
I can tell you exactly. It was the 20th anniversary of the company. I knew that I had to do something cool for the 20th anniversary, and I thought, what could I do? And I was thinking of bringing an art book or something, of all the great, because there's been some amazing artists worked on these books. Then I thought, no, the coolest thing would be the crossover I never thought I would be able to do, Plus, it was good to wait as well, because what I did was I had more characters to put together. If I'd done it 5 years earlier, I wouldn't have had some of the characters. And the more characters you have to play with in a crossover, the more exciting it is. It's like the more ingredients in a cake, so to bake something that big suddenly felt a lot more fun.
Is it supposed to be a one-off, or do you plan, like, now that you have established the big game, like continuing on the idea that all this world will keep on building together? No. I see it as having an ending, really. My plan is to do something that's maybe about 60 volumes long. And I kind of like the idea of the craziness of that, because 60 volumes is 380 comic books, and they all sort of loosely tie together, but without having to bring in other writers or do stories that I'm not happy with and everything. Just something that's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It feels kind of epic. And I think there's something cool about them only ever meeting once, because I always felt like the Avengers, when it appeared as a movie, it was so cool to see all those guys meeting each other for the first time. And then when they see each other the second time, you're like, all right, okay, And then when they see each other all the time, it's not special, So all the characters all being in one story, I think it becomes legendary if it just happens once, and then you never see it happen again. But you say that, but recently we've seen that you started to go back to some characters that maybe were thought to be just one-off series.
Yeah.
Like, you have Prodigy, you have a Nemesis, who's gone back like for 2 volumes now.
Yeah.
So at first we had the idea of Mark Millar does these 6 issues miniseries. Yeah. And then eventually we see what they become. But now you're going back to the idea of doing not exactly ongoing volumes, but multiple series with chapters and new albums.
Only for some though, only the ones that feel as if they need more story, So like Starlight, for example, Starlight feels very complete. Like I worked out a sequel and I was like, I don't need to tell this story. So I worked the whole thing out and I looked at it and I was like, no, it's forcing a story where there isn't necessarily a story because it was very popular and we're making a movie of it. The business side of your brain thinks, oh, maybe I should do some more of these. But then you've got to be true to the story. And I looked at it and I was like, no, that story's done. It's complete, And Kick-Ass is now complete. I think Big Game had Kick-Ass getting superpowers, which is the craziest ending to his story because it was his dream to be a superhero and he gets to save the world. What do you do after that? So I don't want to, I don't want to lose integrity with the stories, but some of them do work as extra ones. Like Nemesis never felt like it was over. You know, I had 3 volumes of Nemesis in my mind beyond what I tried years ago. So Nemesis Reloaded, Nemesis Rogues Gallery, and the final one, Nemesis Forever, that I'll do next year. But that's it complete after that. There's no more Nemesis after it. And you can tell on some gut level, you know, when there's still mileage in something, you know.
Not something that you can rationally explain.
Yeah, it's just a
hinge.
You know when you're ripping people off or whether you're doing the right thing, you know.
So you're not planning on going back to any time in the future doing ongoing comics?
I'd never rule it out, because not with the Millarworld characters there, it's done, but I'll do other things, you know. So, I mean, Superman becomes public domain in 10 years' time, and DC had offered, you know, they said, Marvel and DC have always said to me, if you ever want to do anything, you know, we'd love to have you back to do a special project. And I had a Superman project that came to me. I was in Dubai last year and I was out swimming in the sea, and a whole story came to me when I was swimming. And I came back to the boat and I said to my wife, get me a pen and paper. I need to write all this down. And she said, we're on a boat. Why would we have paper? You know? And I was like, all right. So I got back to the hotel and I started scribbling all the ideas down. But then I thought, it's bigger than this. I want to do a big, long Superman story, maybe 36 issues long instead of just 6. So I'm going to wait till Superman's public domain in 10 years and I can own it. And then I have 6 volumes of Superman, and I've chosen the artists that I want to work on them. But I'll start working on them probably in about 5 years' time. And I'll give the artists 5 years to draw those books, and then I'll bring them out, you know, myself.
But I'm just jumping back on this answer that what kind of Superman are we talking about? Because you know that it's only the primary and the first version of Superman that is going to be public domain.
Yeah.
But we're speaking about a Superman who can jump really high but cannot fly. We're talking about a Superman who won't have any major arch nemesis or background. So what kind of Superman story are you trying to do if you cannot use everything that is in this
Superman was amazing in 1938, you know, like he didn't he didn't just get great in 1963 or 1987 or whatever. I don't really care about any of the modern villains for Superman. You know, for me, Lex Luthor's public domain around the same time, you know. Yeah. So I would use Lex Luthor and that's it. I wouldn't use everything else I do would be new villains that I would create, you know. And I think Superman needs new villains. Like Superman's Rogues Gallery, Luthor and Brainiac are fantastic. They're great characters. The Parasite is a pretty good character. The Parasite's pretty good. But beyond that, you know, Toyman's not that great. The Prankster, Bizarro, you know. So I can tell a Superman story without using those guys. So yeah, very easy. I'm really looking forward to it. I already know what my plan is, what I'm going to do.
All right. Getting back to Millar, you can have your water. Yeah. So that should be my coffee. But speaking about the fact that you are doing a mini series with your Millarworld characters and titles, I was wondering because you're quite loud about the comics industry on your networks, and I was wondering why something like the Magic Order could have been an ongoing series, because without relaunching for each volume, you could just have a keep the numbering, change the artist, and just say, hey, it's a new entry point, get excited, and and I was really wondering why you didn't choose that way.
I think it was just time-wise, because I work for Netflix. Magic Order I created as a television show before I created as a comic. So it's not a creator-owned comic the way the Millarworld stuff is. Like, I sold the company in 2017, and everything after that I created in-house at Netflix as a movie or as a comic. As a movie or as a TV show. And I said to them, look, do you mind if I do comic books of this? Because I like doing comic books. And Netflix were very relaxed about it. They were like, sure, yeah, only if you work with great artists. So it's weirdly, the comic is a adaptation of the thing I created in another medium. So there was 5 seasons planned, and these are the 5 seasons. But at the same time, they wanted me to do Prodigy 2 for the Prodigy movies we're planning to make, and they wanted me to do other things. So that's why there wasn't 5 volumes in a row every month, because they were pulling me onto other projects, and then I would come back to Magic Order later, you know. So I didn't have 2 years just to do Magic Order, you know. I had to spread it over about 6 years, really.
All right, and so this brings me to my a second question about that. That how does it work in terms of a creative process when you have a new project launching at Netflix? Is it something that comes out of your mind really, or is it sometimes maybe like an order from Netflix, like? For example, Nightclub, which has a superhero kids, vampires, YouTube and monetization by the web, which really seems to be like you could operate from an algorithm, this is the stuff that kids like. Mark, please do a comic. With
no. Thankfully, I mean, one of the deals was they never get to interfere in anything creatively, But what they can say is, okay, the film team really want to do a Prodigy movie. Could you do 2 more volumes of Prodigy, that kind of thing? And I'd be like, well, I'm planning to do, if they say 5 more, I would say I don't have 5 stories, but I've got 2 stories that I'm planning to do. And they're like, cool, that's okay. So then I've done 3 volumes of Prodigy because they want that stuff in advance. So when they're making the first movie, they know where the story goes from there, So they never say to me, oh, we'd like a vampire thing or we'd like a sci-fi thing. They just say, what do you want to do? And then once I've done it, they say, could we get some more of this, So they stay out of the creative though, which thank God. I would never be able to. I hate that, if there's a bunch of people telling me what to do.
Squawking in your ear.
But correct me if I'm wrong. I think I remember when we did the ambassadors. I mean, when you did the ambassadors, obviously, I think there was this idea that the characters are supposed to be like representative of countries, which maybe we thought like, this is because of Netflix wants to implant in those areas.
That was my idea for Netflix, So okay. I'll sit in strategy meetings, and they said to me, what do you want to do next year? And this was years ago. I mean, because ambassadors took a long time because Travis Charest, who's the world's slowest artist, he took 4 years to draw 1 issue, So this was back in 2018 or something, like ages ago. And I said to them, listen, I've got an idea for a superhero project. And they said, why, what's so special? And I said, because it can fully take advantage of the Netflix business model. Because usually whenever you launch a superhero project, you focus entirely on the American market. And then the international market hopefully does well, but the American market is where you launch it. The characters are American. It's set in America, generally speaking, Marvel movies, DC movies. And I was like, what's interesting about Netflix is America is just a tiny part of the business model, it's massive in other countries. And I was like, any emerging market for Netflix, we can just create a new character with the next ambassadors or the one after. We can be like, if India is suddenly becoming a huge market, you've got an Indian superhero can pop up. If Pakistan is becoming huge, a Pakistani superhero, and they were like, we love this, So that was me thinking about how to utilize the model that Netflix has, because it's very unique, because you probably couldn't do that in cinema. I don't think in the same way, because those local domestic markets in Netflix are really powerful at getting the message out there. So like India Netflix, for example, would be able to do great publicity with their local teams, in a way that Universal Pictures in India won't have as many feet on the ground,
And you chose France as one of the countries.
Well, I had to choose France, so like, because the thing is, I mean, again, I was thinking from a business point of view as well, and I was thinking the places for comic books is America, Asia, Brazil specifically, France, so I was specifically targeting places. There was no point doing an Icelandic one, because it's a tiny number of people who read comics in Iceland, where France is 90% of the European graphic novel market is literally France alone. I don't know if you know that, it's really crazy, but 90% of Panini business is in France, which is insane. So the appetite for comics is huge, Same, Britain's good as well, but France was somewhere I really wanted to do. Plus, I also think I really like, what Miraculous is? Do you know Miraculous? It's
sure. French cartoon, yeah.
And I'm friends with Thomas Astruc, the guy who created it, And I love his show. My kids love his show. I think it's the best superhero television show out of everything. It's way better than anything Marvel or DC are doing. It's really, really good. And it's so imaginative and it looks great. And I was genuinely inspired by that. I thought France has got a good backdrop. And the French flag looks like a superhero colours, the same as Captain America and everything. So I had a brilliant designer who designed Mad Max Fury Road, a guy called Brendan McCarthy, who's amazing. Brendan designed comics. He's an amazing comic guy, but he's just a genius. I mean, I've been in awe of Brendan my whole life. And I said to Brendan, could you design a few of these costumes. And the first one he did was the French one, and I was like, this is good, you know. And he added in little details that I hadn't thought of that I then incorporated into the story and everything. So,
yeah. On the topic of this relationship you have with Netflix. So right now we've seen Jupiter's Legacy, we've seen Super Crooks, and we've seen El Elegido, so American Jesus.
Yeah.
How are you? I'm sure you're involved, but how much are you involved with the current developing projects? And as such, I think it's Magic Order and
King of Spies as well.
Which one?
King of Spies.
King of Spies,
well,
yeah. So can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like whenever you do comic stuff, it's weird. You just say what you're working on, and people are like, oh yeah, it's cool. But whenever you give details on a film thing, it suddenly becomes 200 articles and everything, you know. So we have to kind of let everything roll out on an official capacity, you know. But just, I mean, it's no secret, we've been working on them for years. We tried Magic Order, we tried with one team and it wasn't working. So we changed the teams and brought in a different development team. And it's working really well now. It's really good. King of Spies, we're looking to do as a movie. We thought about doing it as a TV show, but we're planning to do a movie instead. So my involvement has tightened, you know, more as the years have gone on, because when I was in the studio originally, I was trying to navigate things, you know. So Jupiter's Legacy, for example, I would write notes and, you know, send them in, but I didn't have too much power. I had a little bit of power, but not much. Whereas now I have a kind of veto where I can stop something that I don't like. So I actually find myself a lot of the time, you know, sort of saying, no, this isn't working, you know. And part of you, whenever you're a writer, sometimes you're very keen for your work to be adapted to the screen because it's fun, it's exciting. But I realize I don't want it to be made unless it's perfect, you know, and unless it's as good as it possibly can be. So much my job now is like, no, it's not working. Let's take it back and we bring in somebody else and try it. So development is long and boring, but hopefully you get something good at the end of it, you know.
But we agree that it's you who want to do comics. Like Netflix could just use your talents.
Yeah, they were so cool about it. They said your life could be so much easier because I do the comics kind of just for fun, you know. Like, I just love doing the comics.
So if you want to make comics like elsewhere, there's no obligation legal for you.
Well, because I'm on staff as an executive, you know, like I'm not able to go and work for Marvel or DC or something. But I have had a carve out in my contract where I said, I've just got an itch to do some stuff, you know, like I thought it was going to be Superman. I thought I would do Superman. Then I thought, I think I might wait and just own Superman, just own it in 10 years' time. And the reason that also happened is I'm really good friends with all the Marvel guys because I worked there for so long, you know, it's still the same people. So I meet them for drinks and things anyway, you know. And CB Cebulski got in touch with me, who runs Marvel, and he said, why would you work for DC? And a couple of other people dropped me a line and said, look, DC will screw it up, you know, like come and do it at Marvel, you know. So then I thought, well, I don't really have another Marvel story. I said, because I'm a really big believer in unless you have a story that's as good as it can be and you're excited about, don't do it, you know, like just go and do something else unless you're really passionate about it. And I was kind of thinking about it and I thought, I've kind of done everything at Marvel, you know, like I've reinvented the Avengers. I got to write the X-Men. I've done Spider-Man, written Wolverine, Fantastic Four. You know, like I'm not going to do Howard the Duck, you know, like I don't want to do something unless it's something gigantic, you know. And I did their biggest ever crossover, you know, Civil War, so more than any Marvel graphic novel in history, you know. So I was like, I don't want to come back and do something smaller, you know. So then what was weird is I was out for a run and I had this idea when I was running and I was like, this would be the biggest comic of all time. I had this idea that came to me and I haven't told Marvel what it is yet, but I said to them, I'll tell you in January. I've carved out 12 weeks. I says, I think I've got something that could be gigantic, like huge. And they were like, let's do it, you know? So like, and I said, you don't know what it is yet because it's not what you expect. And people are going to be really shocked by it. But I think this could be the biggest modern comic, you know, since certainly the last generation, the last 25 years, I think it'll sell double Civil War, you know? And I've told a couple of friends what it is.
That's quite an assumption.
Well, the thing is, because I don't want to do something that sells less than Civil War. What's the point? You know, I'd rather just go and...
I'm sure you've got the ambition.
Yeah.
I
know that about that. But it's also kind of... You'll understand when you hear what the project is. But it's kind of a guarantee it will be bigger. I mean, it's so colossal. And it sounds crazy.
Who are you going to kill?
And the thing is, all those things that everybody's done, like, you can't just do that stunt. You can't kill Spider-Man. You can't, you know... you have to do something that has never been done before. And this is why it might not happen, right? Because unless I get to do exactly what I want, I'm not going to do it. I'd rather just go to the pub for 12 weeks and hang out with my friends, you know, and just leave it, because it has to be worth coming back for, you know. And but I told some friends, and some friends were like, if you can get away with this would be the biggest comic of all time, you know. So it's exciting. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
All right, but you're still writing also comics with Netflix. And
for
Mark Millar.
I'm going to announce in December. I'll announce all the next year's books. You know, so.
And I wanted to know that aren't you going to write at some point a comic book that can't be made into a movie or a series by Netflix? Can't you do that? Something very so complex or so esoteric or something that just can't make it to the screen.
Can you think of one good movie, you know, one great movie that couldn't have been a comic book?
Well, it works that way, but maybe not the other way around.
No,
you know?
I think. Tell me one great comic that could never be a movie.
Nemesis.
My Nemesis.
It's too violent, man. It's just too violent.
No, we're planning it. It's with Warner Brothers just now.
I could think of several science fiction comic books that are really like Decorum from Jonathan Hickman and Mike Huddleston, for example.
That'd be a great TV series. I think that'd be.
I don't think the visuals getting something like or even
Watchmen would be a great television show. You know, that would have been if they'd made that a 12-part HBO show.
But you think that any comic book can make it to the screen
with a genius filmmaker? I mean, this is the big mistake they're making. They're hiring people who are not great to make adaptations of comic book stuff. They used to have Sam Raimi, Bryan Singer, Matthew Vaughn, Christopher Nolan, you know, geniuses. But you can't just get some guy, you know, it has to be some, because comic books are very hard to adapt. You have from 1940 to about the year 1998, they generally made really bad comic book adaptations, with the exception of Tim Burton and Richard Donner. But all the others kind of suck. You know, they're okay, they're fun, you know, but they're not great movies or great television shows. Whereas when you bring an auteur in, somebody who's really great at what they do, they find a way of telling that story. So when I say any comic can be adapted, I don't mean any comic can be adapted by anyone. But I think if Denis Villeneuve was given a Jonathan Hickman comic, it'd be the best damn science fiction movie you've ever seen, you know, like, so you have to have a genius tackling the most difficult material, I think. Yeah.
Although you have I wouldn't call it a technique, but you have a way to like provoke the reader with shocking facts or shocking ideas that maybe, you know, Hollywood, it's not just about talent, it's also about censorship and what the general audience is able to receive, which is why I was mentioning Nemesis. I'm not just talking about the big scene where he killed all the guards, etc. But there's the idea that the sister and the brother have sex. I'm not sure, maybe like Netflix
Nemesis
would be okay.
Oh, it's artificial insemination.
Yeah, it's artificial insemination, sorry. But I'm not sure that maybe Hollywood wouldn't be really open to this
Here's
idea.
the funny thing, right? See, working in Hollywood now, I've been working in Hollywood for 15 years or whatever. It's never the things you think that attracts them in. Right now, think about this. The most snapped up properties are actually the most outrageous ones. So Kick-Ass, for example, and Wanted, right? You know, Wanted is obscene, right? You know, but Hollywood were like, we want it. Kick-Ass starts with the superhero with his costume around his ankles and he's masturbating, looking at African porn on like.
Yeah, but you would agree that the adaptations are not as harsh as your comic books.
No, the Kick-Ass literally starts. The opening scene of Kick-Ass is a superhero.
I was thinking more about Wanted, about the, you know, the rudeness or the very graphic stuff. It's never going to be the same stuff that you can see on the page compared to the screen.
It's not Eminem in the hero.
Yeah, because I mean, Timur Bekmambetov is a crazy Kazakh filmmaker. You know, I mean, he brought his own insanity to that film as well, which I love. You know, there's so many great bits, like the big FU scene, like when James McAvoy cracks Chris Pratt with the keyboard and the tooth and everything. I mean, that's absolutely what I would do, you know? So what they do is they sometimes fine tune things that suits a movie, you know, where things are a little bit different. But look at The Boys. I mean, The Boys is even, I would say The Boys TV show is probably more outrageous than the comic book, you know, and in a lot of ways, you know, there's a lot of crazy stuff in that show. So people think Hollywood just wants safe stuff, but they actually don't. So when you look at, if you think of the last, think of all the independent comics that get made into films, right? Kingsman is more outrageous than any James Bond film, you know? Yeah. Kick-Ass is more outrageous than a Spider-Man film. Ghost World, you know, History of Violence, you know? it's all the stuff that's actually a little bit screwed up.
You have Deadpool that works now better than the Marvel Studio stuff.
Yeah, and the Deadpool comic is not as outrageous as the Deadpool movie, you know? So, like, Hollywood's is braver than people think. And actually, the producers are very excited by the more out there material, and they're kind of bored by the vanilla material because they've got guys that can do that. They actually want the more eccentric stuff. So yeah, it's not what people expect, you know. And think of Frank Millar's Sin City, you know, and 300 and all these things, you know. Hollywood studios were jumping on that stuff years ago, you know, and Hellboy and everything. It's the stuff it's more personal and it's more eccentric that they're drawn towards as opposed to generic. Because people think if you do something that looks like a movie, then you can sell that as a movie. But they already have stuff like that. They don't care about that stuff.
All right. So I've got one last question for now. What's the deal with your autobiography? Because I noticed that in all your trade paperbacks, it's just called another name. So, and God created Mark Millar, a cat named Mark Millar. So is there going to be really an autobiography?
At some point, I'll probably do it. But I think the autobiography has to be
teasing or...
I like to mess with people with it, you know. So like the new one, I think that just came out is called "Touch My Bum." You know, that's and it's coming next year. "Touch My Bum," and but I will at some point. But I think if I do it now, it'll be boring because I still work with all of these guys. You know, so I'm never going to offend anyone. You know, whereas in 20 years, if I do it, I'll have stopped, you know, working at a high level in Hollywood,
and you lush everything
so I can
out.
tell the truth. You know, so it's always much more interesting at the end of your career than when you're still working. You know, so yeah, I think it's probably 20 years time. I think I'll get it done, and it'll be great because I've got so much dirt on everybody, you know. So it's gonna be fun.
The dirtier book in the comics history. Thank you a lot, Mark Millar, for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
You know, like some of the greatest writers have worked on Swamp Thing, but it's like Daredevil, one of those characters that's kind of a B-level character, but has really good creative teams, doesn't it? Yeah.
Including yourself.
Well, I think I was one of the worst ones that ever did. You know?
It's quite interesting.
I was so young. I mean,
That was one of your first work for DC.
I was 22. I was really young. Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thanks. They're collecting it next month into like a big giant hardcover. You know those big omnibuses.
Yeah.
So every single issue in a big hardcover. So it looks good. $100.
I don't think it's available in France though.
It will be soon. You know, it comes out in 4 weeks, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
All right. I wasn't trying to imitate your accent. I'm sorry. I have a tendency also to imitate accent, but that wasn't the case here. I'm just going to do a short introduction in French, and then we can get started.